In this video, we're going to talk about three different ways to factor complex trinomials. So let's first define what a complex trinomial is. So complex trinomials are in the form y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. And we know that a cannot be equal to 1, or else that would be a simple trinomial. So some examples of complex trinomials are 2x squared minus 27x plus 36. Another example would be 6x squared plus 7x plus 2. Something that is unique about these complex trinomials is that you cannot factor out a common factor. So here, there is no greatest common factor. The greatest common factor cannot be factored out. Okay, so the first way to factor complex trinomials is using a method called decomposition. So the first way is called decomposition. And using the method of decomposition, we want to do two things. So let's look at an example. So here, if we have 6x squared plus 7x plus 2, the example that we wrote up top, we want to do a few things. The first thing is you want to determine the product of A times C. First step is to determine the product of A times C. So the second thing we want to do is we have to find two numbers that are going to multiply to A times C. So two numbers, so we got to find two numbers, multiply to equal to A times C, and they also have to, the same two numbers have to add up to equal to the B value. So in this particular example, we can see that 6 times 2 will give us 12, and the B value is 7. So we have to find two numbers that multiply to equal to 12, but then also add up to 7. So in this situation, that would be 3, 4. And so 3 times 4 gives you 12, and 3 plus 4 gives you 7. Then the next step in decomposition is then to split up the middle term of 7x into 3 and 4. So here we would have 6x squared, and you want to try to see which one would be easily factorable. So we could obviously put the 4x there, but 6 and 3 have a common factor of 3, which would easily help factor that out. So here, you put 6x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 2. So then we're going to find a common factor between the first two terms and the last two terms. So here, if we factor out 3x, we'll be left with 2x plus 1. And if we factor out 2, we'll be left with 2x plus 1. As you can see here, 2x plus 1 now can be factored out as well. And so we'll be left with 3x. We'll be left with 2x plus 1, and then whatever left over, which is 3x plus 2. And so If we look at our steps of what we did is we determined the product of A times C. We found the two numbers that multiply to A times C. We found two numbers that added up to B. The third step we did was we broke the middle term. We broke the middle term into two parts using the above factors. And then we common factored the first two terms and the last two terms. So we common factored first two terms and the last two terms. And the last step here, number 5, is to common factor the common bracket. Okay, so that's the way to factor by decomposition. The second way to factor complex trinomials is to use a method called crisscross. So the crisscross method is an alternative approach to factoring complex trinomials. So let's look at an example. Let's write one down. And this one will use 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. Okay. So the first step that we want to do is you want to write all the factors that multiply to the first term's coefficient and write them in columns. So the first step is to write all the factors that multiply to the first term's coefficient So in this situation, the two the factors that we would see are 1 and 3. So we can write that down. So we'll write 1 and 3. The second step now is to think of all the factors. So or to write down all the factors that multiply to the last term. And then we'll write that in a different column. I'll write that in a separate column here. And so here we'll have 1 and 2. Okay, so now that we've created two groups of columns, you want to take one of the groups and flip it so that we get all the possible combinations when we start to crisscross. Again, it doesn't matter which group, usually go with the one that has the fewest columns or the less amount of writing. So here we'll flip the second one. And so here, this will be 2 and 1. Okay, so here, step number 3 will be to take one of the groups, and flip it. So here we flipped 1 and 2 to 2 and 1. Now we are going to take the first column and multiply it by the second column. And then we'll take for both components. So this is why it's called the crisscross method. So here, step number 4 will be to crisscross. And our goal is that after you multiply, you will add. So after you multiply, add the products. So add the products, and that should equal the middle term. Okay, so if we start with 1 and 2, and we crisscross here, so if we have 1 times 2, or let's do 3 times 1 first. So here we have 3 times 1 is equal to 3, and we have 3 times 2. So, sorry, we have 2 times 1 will be equal to 2. So if we add those together, that will give us 5. That does not give us the middle term. So therefore, we have to try the other combination. So here we have 1 and 3, and 2 and 1. You crisscross again. Here we have 3. 1 times 1 is equal to 1, and 3 times 2, which will give us 6. Here we add those together. That provides us with 7, which is the middle term. So once you've found the correct factors, the last step is that we simply write out the actual expression. So the top two numbers form the first factor. And the bottom two form the second factor. And here we see that the first column, so first column is the x values, and the second column is the constant. Okay, so if we do that here, we see this would be our x value, this would be our constants. So if we write this out, we now see that our expression would be x plus 2. Our second factor would be 3x plus 1. And finally, the last way to factor complex trinomials is using a method called slide and divide. And for slide and divide, what we want to do is the first step is to multiply. So let's write one out. We'll write a complex trinomial of, say here, 3x squared plus 25x plus 8. So the first step that we're going to take is we're going to multiply a times c. In this situation, if we multiply a times c, we will get an answer of 24. Okay, so we'll rewrite, and then the second step is to rewrite the equation. So now we'll rewrite the equation. Rewrite the equation as x squared plus bx plus a times c. Okay, so in this example, we're writing it as x squared plus 25x plus 24. And as you can see now, it becomes a simple trinomial. So here we get a simple trinomial. A lot simpler to factor. Again, find two numbers that multiply to equal 24 and add up to 25. And those would be 24 and 1. So here, if we factor the trinomial, we get x plus 24 and x plus 1. So third step here would be to just factor the trinomial. Okay, and then the fourth step is to then take the a value that we factored out and we divide the constants by the a value. So here we'll divide constants by a value. And so here we get x plus 24 over 3 and x plus 1 over 3. And so we can rewrite these and simplify at the end. So 5 would be to rewrite and simplify. Here, and we write this as x plus 8. We can write the second factor as 3x plus 1. So this is a general overview of three ways to solve for complex trinomials. Number one is to use decomposition. Number two, using the crisscross method. And number three, using the slide and divide method.